Hi there, I hope you're all doing well, inshallah. Today we are looking at a problem, but this time it's from statistics. We want to make a function that computes the average value of some data and its standard deviation. The problem says that we have a pair of six-sided dice, each one numbered from 1 until 6. And the output of the first dice, we will name it x1, and the other one we will name it x2. The data we want to compute the average value and the standard deviation of is z, simply the sum of those outputs. As we all know, the average value of some data is computed from this formula, the sum of this data divided by the number of the values in this data. And the standard deviation, delta z or sigma, name it as you want, is computed from this formula. If it's not clear, you can Google it and see this formula. This is the formula that we will use. The square root of this term, the sum of the squares of the data minus the average value of the data. So if we get back to our code, here this is a simple description of the problem and the definition of average and the standard deviation of some data. As we saw above here, we said that z is the sum of x1 and x2, but as a first step we want x1 and x2. We here will generate x1 and x2 as random numbers, specifically random integers, and to do so we use rand_i for random integers command in MATLAB. Here we specify the maximum integer that we want MATLAB to generate the vector or the matrix, whatever we want, and here we specify the dimension of the matrix. Here we want xi as a column of n rows and 1 column. Here is the same with x2. Here we define z, which is x1 plus x2. The average value is the sum of z divided by the number of values in z. This is the first thing we want, the average value of z. Here we compute the standard deviation, and to do so we define a variable. We call it whatever we want. Say term 1, we assign it an initial value of 0, and here we enter a for loop to compute the sum that we saw in the standard deviation formula, which is term I, the old value of term 1, plus z, the value and the data, minus the average value, all of this squared, and we compute the sum of them all. After that we compute the standard deviation, which we call delta z, as you all see, which is the square root of term 1 divided by n minus 1, and that's all. Here we just show the output. Here we show the average value of z, and here we show the standard deviation as we computed it with the delta z variable. In this final line we show the standard deviation, but by using std, which is built in command in MATLAB to compute the standard deviation. To call the function, as we all know, we have to save it with the same name as the function name, dice. So here, if we look here, we find the directory that contains our function. Here to call the code or the function, we write its name, dice, and between two brackets the input, which is n in this case. We begin by 10, for example, and here we find the average value 7.3 and the standard deviation as we computed it 2.71006, and the standard deviation as computed by the built-in command is the same one. If we increase the number of throws, we find similar values of the standard deviation, and the average value is different from the first one. If we increase it more, to 1000, it changes, but it's a slight change. So this is all about the code, and I hope if there is any question, please do not hesitate to contact me.